Good morning again. Thank you. Faith and science. Some people try to split those apart and pick one or the other. And I will hopefully take you in a few minutes to where we can all share your own opinion, but my heart is at faith and science. I am an engineer by training, probably since about the age of 6. In those days, my engineering was related to tree houses, and I learned how many nails a willow tree could actually hold. Not very many. Along the way, I had some excellent teachers. I think my teachers were better than my professors later on in college. Let's hear it for teachers. In junior high, I had a couple courses called Earth Science, which really helped me understand an awful lot about how the Earth was formed, how minerals and rocks and mountains and rivers, a big section on hydrology, and obviously I remember that well and I really enjoyed it. Later on, as I was continuing my engineering education, I went to a small school in East Lansing and took a lot of... Is there something funny about the school in East Lansing? We digress. Engineering is based on a lot of math and science. I took a lot of that, and then I took some more. There were some classes I liked so much I took them twice. I gotta tell you, I did a lot better the second time. I didn't take anything 3 times, though. Also, out in my junior high years, I lived out east in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and my dad was working in the District of Columbia during the day, and I would take the bus. These are the days when a 12 or 13-year-old could take his 35 cents, get on the bus, and go for the whole afternoon. And I went down to the Smithsonian. And I am sure some of you have visited the Smithsonian Museum. If you haven't had a chance, you should try. It is one of the most amazing places I think I spent my childhood in. The history of the United States, not just the steam engines and the locomotives, but all of the little inventions in between. A lot of people don't realize that probably we wouldn't be here today if it weren't for barbed wire. Yes, barbed wire. Barbed wire was the defining factor when the population started moving west, and allowed the farmers and the ranchers to take control of the plains. And we don't know who invented barbed wire. I don't think his name was Barb. By the time I was in my 20s, I had succeeded in gathering probably most of the book learning. Then I entered into a phase of learning which I call wisdom. I'm still learning, and I hope to be learning for a long time. All of this is leading up to what I think is a very interesting story of science 2,000 years ago, as Christianity was struggling to find its direction. At that time, in addition to the people that were writing down the books of the Bible and fighting with the political forces of those days, there was a small group of people who could have been called geographers, early astronomers, mathematicians, but they couldn't be a mathematician until somebody invented trigonometry. So once that invention was in place, they could advance further the mathematics. All of these people were advancing science in the period of 100, 200, 300 AD. All they could use were their eyes. They had no instruments. They had no measuring tools. So they had to think. They looked at the stars. They looked at the sun. They measured shadows. I think there's a famous story of them measuring where the sun's shadow fell in the well in Egypt at noon. It's amazing what they could do with their minds. One of the earliest documented geographers and mathematicians was a man by the name of Claudius Ptolemy, who lived, I think, in Egypt. And he advanced from his observations and studying the stars, studying the rise of the sun and the precession of the moon. He advanced the thought that the earth was the center of the universe. The earth was the center of the universe. This is called geocentrism. And because there was no one to argue that, we didn't have any pictures from space to argue the point, it came into common acceptance. And as I've read, the Catholic Church, the Holy Catholic Church, started to weave this into their doctrine. And this became part of the Christian thinking going forward, that the earth was created first, the sun and the moon and the stars came later. This lasted for 1,400 years. That's what, 28, 30, 35 generations? These thoughts were passed down. A young guy from Poland, his name was Nicholas Copernicus, I believe in 1512, published his conclusion that the sun was at the center of our universe, and that the earth revolved around the sun, as did the planets. And further, in contrary to what the church was saying at this time, our universe was but one of many. Thousands of universes, he predicted. Again, all of this with just the unaided eye. His theory, his books that were published were done with political fear, fear from the church. He had several followers that took up the reins after he died. And 100 years later, after Copernicus, a young man by the name of Galileo enters the scene. Now, Galileo, who most of you have heard about, had one distinct advantage. Some Dutch inventors a few years prior had invented the lens. The lens, so that you could focus things from afar. Galileo built the first telescope. And from that he could see the moons of Jupiter. I think 4 are large enough that he could see this with this crude telescope. Galileo published prolifically. Prolifically, is that the word? He published and almost perished. He was placed under house arrest by the church. Even in house arrest, he continued to publish his findings. All of the rumblings about Earth no longer being at the center of the universe really kind of stewed for the next 300 years. I don't think it was until 1992 that the Catholic Church officially recognized that Galileo had been correct. Since then, there's been many others. We've moved along quickly with satellites and other observation platforms. And there are some other scientists who added greatly to the knowledge that we have today. People that are almost well known, like Isaac Newton, a guy by the name of Einstein. And in case you've forgotten, there was an astronomer whose name was Hubble. It's not just a telescope. It was a American astronomer who I believe passed away sometime in the 60s, but contributed greatly to the amount of current learning. These ancient astronomers had only their eyes. I say only, they also had their minds. With their God-given talents, they were able to hypothesize where planets would be, what possible explanation for the position of a moon, or the rising even of the tides and the fall of the tides. In our lifetime, in my lifetime, we've seen man advance both into space flight and put people into orbit and put a man on the moon. 1969. There's a space event coming up this week. Does anybody know what it is? Tuesday morning. I'm sure it'll be on the news shows. We launched a satellite to fly by Pluto in 2006, 9 years ago. It finally got there. And it will pass by at its closest point on Tuesday morning. And then it's moving quite fast now as it leaves our solar system. It will continue on in the universe, and as long as we can get a cell phone call to it, we'll get some pictures back. As long as we get some cell phone contact, we'll get some pictures back. This issue of whether the sun is at the center of the universe or the earth is at the center of the universe caused some substantial religious upheaval in what would be called the transition from the the Middle Ages, say leading up to 1500, and then what was later to become the Scientific Revolution. There are still factions today that believe that creationism is the foundation for the whole world as we know it. And I believe that there is a certain amount of creationism in all of us, and I'm very comfortable with faith and science being commingled. The people who today are the doctors and the geneticists and the inventors of new medical techniques are people like you and me. And with training, with education, and with faith, I believe, they pursue their specialty and push us along the evolutionary scale. Contrary to there being either science or faith, the two, I believe, are some of the most powerful combination that can be brought forth. If you wish to pursue other studies, even the NASA.gov website has a great deal to talk about faith in their exploration of the heavens. I strongly believe in my heart that this has been part of my faith walk. It's my journey, and I hope to continue it as many years as I can. With faith, with our minds, with our ability to reason and to think, we can continue to learn from the Bible and the teachings of the church as we go forward. I want to continue to learn about rocks and mountains and oceans and stars and anything else that's part of life. In June, I became a year older. It's not a big deal when you're 60-something. It's a big deal when you're 4 or 5. But it's helped me to appreciate more the beauty of human creation, the bones and the structures and the capillaries and the finer points of the human hand, the hand which can touch, the hand which can heal, the hands which can paint, hands which play musical instruments. When they come out in miniature form, perfectly formed, even with trimmed nails. I can't explain it anything else but faith and science together. And I'm sometimes overwhelmed by the thought that a grandchild could teach me this at this old age. That's my story I wanted to share with you today. I'm an engineer. It's a little hard to talk to me sometimes. But I'm working on that. I involve myself with music a lot here at church, and I just have to remember not to take the piano apart. It's working fine just the way it is. I appreciate your attention, and I've really enjoyed this opportunity to put myself under stress. Enjoy the rest of your day and be blessed by it. Thank you.